Thanks for taking the time to watch this short video. We want to change how we send reading books home for your child, and we want to be sending 2 books from our new reading scheme for each child to read at home every week. That will take some time to do because each book has to be matched to your child's phonic knowledge. So rather than do it in a lesson time or a lunch time, we'll take time after school to do that so that we're really careful about assigning the right book to the right child. So we'll collect books in on a Monday and they'll be ready by Wednesday, but probably sooner than that, especially once we get quicker at our new system. In the meantime, the e-library is available to everybody, and we will only change your books if we can see that your child has read them 3 times. So our new scheme really emphasises the importance of rereading the same book, because each time they reread the book, they'll show progress. So in the first read, it would be quite usual for your child to have to segment and blend most or some of the words. We would be looking to see that they recognise common exception words, those tricky to read and spell words. So if this was the first page of the text, we would be expecting your child on the first read, if they haven't seen this text before, to have to say to themselves, Jin has a test. Jin has a test. Really encouraging that rereading of the sentence to make sense. And it would be good if they start to recognise keywords like a, the, go when you're reading. The second time, we would want the child to recognise repeated words like the name Jin. We would want them to be recognising that on the page and needing to segment and blend less, and really noticing punctuation. They won't notice it as much in really short phrases where you haven't got more than one sentence on the page, but as they progress through the scheme, really pausing at a comma or a full stop. And then the third time, we would want your child to be reading fluently and showing expression. So getting started, reading starts with the front cover. It doesn't start when you open the page. So really looking at that front cover, oh, what do you think is going to happen in this story? Why do you think that? And in talking around the cover, it also gives your child a clue as to what's going to come next. We love these pages in our new scheme. It gets them ready to read the whole story. In this story, so you're really looking at the main characters of the story, and these names are going to be repeated on most pages, so if they can recognise them and not need to segment and blend them, that's brilliant. If your child is reluctant, then maybe take it in turns and say, okay, who's going to read first, you or I? And then take it in turns to read the book. You read a page, I read a page. And if that's what gets them reading, that's fine. So talking about the pictures is really important. It will help them anticipate what they're going to read. So it's okay to flick through the book and notice everything on the page, but really talk about the characters they can see, what they're doing, what you can see is happening, particularly if you can see a word that's going to trip them up. Use it with them as they look at the pages, and that will help them when they get there. Okay, so the pictures are there for a reason. And then using those words, who, what, where, when, why, how. What's happening here? How do you think she's feeling? What are they going to do next? All of those questions, all of that talking are really, really important. And then if they're reading an unfamiliar word and it's really tricky, help them sound it out. That's the segmenting and blending it together. If there are sounds you know that they keep misreading, make a note of it in the diary for us. That's really helpful feedback. And just reminding them of those sounds, if they are, use it as a teaching point. Remind them of the sounds that they've learnt. If it's a long word, and of course I've chosen a book that doesn't have any long words in, but if it was a longer word, split it up into half. So if I was going to read blending, I might look at blend and then the ing. Just break it up into 2 parts to help your child break it down. Talk about, if there are any words in there that are unusual, talk about them. What does that mean? Explain it to them. And it's always nice to explore, what other words can you think that mean the same thing? Predictions are great, and there's lots of opportunities in the books to predict. So right at the beginning here, we've got, Jin has a test, will I pass? So the obvious question is, what do you think? Is she going to pass the test? Yes or no? And there's no right or wrong answer with that. The children's guesses initially might be quite wild, but as they get better at making predictions, you would expect them to be more realistic, more feasible, and thinking about how the story might end. Recall and sequencing is really important, maybe not on the first read, but certainly by the 3rd read, we really want to know whether your child is understanding what they're reading. So the decoding, the actually segmenting and blending is one part of reading, but really taking on board what they're reading and understanding what's happening in the story is really key for their comprehension. We love these pages that are now in our new reading books, that they've got what we call a story map. And this one is numbered, so they've got to remember what happened at key points in the story. That's really important for us. So you don't have to do it every time, but by the 3rd read, get them to retell the story. Tell us whether they can do that. You can also see if you can ask them what we would call retrieval questions. What happened after they? How many times did they? All of those things. They've got to remember something from the story, and it's okay if they need to look back in the text to find the answer. That's all good practice. Okay. All of those questions, don't ask too many, but you're just checking, are they actually understanding this yet, or are they still really having to focus on decoding the words so they can't think yet about their understanding? Inference. Now this is more as they go through the scheme. So inference would be looking at the picture and what they've read and taking meaning from that isn't spelt out. So if we look at this picture here, an inference question would be, how long has the ship been there? How can you tell? So the picture hints at it's been there a very long time, it's starting to rot, the sails are shredded, it hasn't just sunk. So you're trying to get your child to think around the story and just think a bit deeper, but that will come with time. Making links. We always want the children to be making links. So if they're reading a story and they can think of, oh, this reminds me of another story I've read. That's great. But it might be that's something you work towards. So please don't feel that in reception your child should be making those links, but they might. And that would be lovely. So thinking about a story that's had a similar event, or if it's been a story about a superhero, have we read any other superhero books? What can we think of? If it's a fairy tale, how do you know it's a fairy tale? Or how do you know it's non-fiction? How do you know it's a poetry book? So really looking at those similarities and those differences are great. Now, pause, prompt, praise. It can be hard reading at home. I know that from experience. My experience of reading at home with my own children, very different to reading in school. So lots and lots of praise. Give them time to think. So it might be that in your head you have to count to 5 before you give them a prompt. So it might be that you give them the word if it's a really, really difficult and they're just really struggling and you can see that they're losing their enthusiasm. Give them the word first time round, help them out, or help them segment and blend. Break it down, but just really try and make them feel like it's okay, we've got time to look, no rush. Prompt them if they need it, so you could give them the initial sound, you could help them with it, that's fine. And then just be really specific about praising, not just a well done, but you sounded that out really well, or that was hard, wasn't it? But you remembered your initial sounds, or well done for sticking at it. It's tricky, isn't it? You don't have to read all of the book all in one go. And I know that family life's really busy. So, if you're just all tired and there's a lot to do that evening, or you've come in late, don't feel you've got to read the whole book all in one night. It's fine. Reading half is fine. So it's really hard if your child is struggling. You don't want to keep correcting them because that might put them off. So you have to say to yourself, well, I'm not going to say no. Here's what else you could do. So you might say, oh, have another look. If they've misread a word, and it's quite common for children to go through a phase of seeing the initial sound and guessing. So, oh, have another look at that word. Almost, very nearly, not quite, good try, you're getting close. It's a more positive way of saying, you haven't quite got that right yet. Okay, thanks for listening, thanks for your time, and I really want everybody to be reading at home more in the spring term. So we'll launch this in the spring term, and I'm always interested in your feedback. Okay, good luck.